Have you ever felt like you've lived this life before, as if every experience, every joy and struggle, was part of something far older than memory? Alan Watts often said that existence is a cosmic play, where consciousness incarnates again and again, not to reach an end, but to remember itself. Yet, there comes a time, for a few souls, when the cycle nears completion. A final lifetime, not marked by achievement or perfection, but by awakening. If you've ever sensed that you're standing on the edge of something infinite, that you no longer seek meaning but embody it, you may already be living your last turn through the wheel of reincarnation. Watts believed that the journey of the soul is not a path of progress, but of recognition. We are not climbing toward divinity. We are rediscovering that we were divine all along. In this final life cycle, the soul begins to see through the illusion, the game of fear, success, and identity that once felt so urgent. The world still moves, but your relationship to it changes. You stop fighting life and start flowing with it. You feel less like a participant and more like the silent witness behind it all, watching the play, knowing it's beautiful, knowing it's fleeting. For Watts, enlightenment was not an escape from the human experience, but a deeper intimacy with it. In your final incarnation, you stop trying to transcend the world and begin to love it without conditions. You see pain and joy as two faces of the same truth, waves rising and falling upon the same ocean. There is a stillness inside you, even when life is chaotic. You begin to laugh at the seriousness of it all, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that everything is part of the same cosmic dance. This stage of awakening, he said, reveals itself not through grand revelations, but through small moments of clarity. When you look at a sunset and feel that you are both the watcher and the light, or when silence feels like home. The soul nearing the end of its journey does not seek validation, power, or certainty. It seeks only to be. There is a deep trust in the rhythm of things, a surrender that feels like remembering. It's as if you stopped chasing destiny and started becoming it. So if lately you felt detached from old fears, strangely peaceful amid uncertainty, or drawn to truths that cannot be explained, it may not be coincidence. Watts would tell you that the final life cycle is not about escaping existence, but about dissolving completely into it. It's the moment the wave recognizes itself as the ocean, no longer rising, no longer falling, simply being. And when that happens, you will know this is not the end of your story, but the final awakening of the storyteller. Alan Watts often said that life is not a journey toward something, but a dance. And yet, most people spend their existence believing they're climbing a staircase towards some divine finish line. But for those in their final life cycle, something profound begins to shift. The soul grows tired of chasing illusions. The dance becomes more fluid, the rhythm more natural. You begin to feel as though you've played every role there is to play. The lover, the seeker, the victim, the conqueror. And now, you're simply observing the dance itself. Watts would describe this as the awakening from the illusion of progress. You stop trying to arrive and begin to realize you've been home all along. In the earlier cycles of reincarnation, the soul is hungry. It craves experience, identity, and understanding. But in the last cycle, there's a deep sense of completion. You no longer need the world to validate you. The noise of ambition, conflict, and comparison fades into the background. This doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you free. Watts explained that when one realizes the futility of striving, it's not a loss of passion, but a transformation of it. The energy once spent chasing becomes energy devoted to being. You start to see life as art, not something to win, but something to express. One of the first signs that your soul may be nearing its final incarnation is the feeling of detachment from external identity. The labels that once defined you, career, nationality, even name, begin to feel weightless, like clothes that no longer fit. You wear them when needed, but you no longer believe they are you. Watts would call this the unmasking of the self. It's not about rejecting the world. It's about seeing through it. You start to recognize that every personality you've ever worn was temporary, just as every wave eventually falls back into the sea. Another sign, Watts explained, is a growing compassion that no longer discriminates. In your last life cycle, empathy stops being selective. You no longer feel love only for those who agree with you, or pity only for those who suffer. Instead, you see yourself in everyone, the saint and the sinner, the wise and the lost. You realize that consciousness has been playing all these parts, and that judgment was always self-directed illusion. What would say that when you finally understand this, love becomes effortless, not sentimental, not forced, but as natural as breathing. And perhaps the most profound transformation is the quiet joy that begins to replace fear. In the earlier stages of awakening, you question, you doubt, you grasp for certainty. But in the last cycle, doubt gives way to wonder. You no longer need to know where life is taking you. You trust the current. Watts would describe this as the wisdom of insecurity, the realization that safety was never found in control, but in surrender. The soul in its final turn no longer clings to the shore. It lets go, not in despair, but in grace. Watts believed that the universe repeats itself through countless lifetimes, not out of punishment, but out of curiosity. Consciousness keeps reincarnating because it wants to explore its own infinite nature. Yet, there comes a point when the soul has seen enough of the play to understand its script. In this final life cycle, you begin to sense that the patterns are familiar. The joys, the losses, the struggles, the triumphs, all echoing something you've already lived. But instead of feeling trapped by the repetition, you start to laugh at it. You understand, as Watts said, that life is not meant to be taken so seriously. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, why not? This awareness brings a strange peace. The chaos of existence still surrounds you, but you no longer feel consumed by it. It's as if you step back just enough to watch the play unfold with compassionate detachment. Watts often compared life to music, not something to reach the end of, but something to be enjoyed while it lasts. In your final cycle, you stop trying to conduct the orchestra and start listening to the melody. You recognize that the beauty of existence lies not in its permanence, but in its transience. Every note matters precisely because it fades. Another sign that your soul is nearing completion is the deep acceptance of impermanence. In previous incarnations, you might have resisted change, clung to relationships, fought against time, feared loss. But now, you see that nothing truly ends, it only transforms. You begin to understand death not as destruction, but as renewal. Watts described this as the ultimate awakening, the realization that to die is to be reborn in every moment. The fear of endings dissolves, replaced by reverence for the cycle itself. In this stage, many people experience moments of intense déjà vu or timeless awareness, flashes where past, present, and future seem to merge. Watts explained that this happens because the soul is starting to step outside of linear time. You begin to live more from intuition than memory, more from presence than thought. The boundaries between who you were, who you are, and who you will be blur until all that remains is the experience of being. It's not enlightenment as escape, it's enlightenment as embodiment. And perhaps the most powerful mark of the final life cycle is the loss of the desire to escape the human experience. You stop seeking enlightenment as a destination and start finding it in the ordinary, in laughter, in sorrow, in stillness, in chaos. Watts said that the truly awakened person doesn't float above life. They sink into it completely. The last life is not about leaving the world behind. It's about merging with it so fully that the separation disappears. You no longer ask, when will I be free? Because you've realized you were never bound to begin with. Alan Watts often said that the soul's final lifetime carries a subtle sense of déjà vu, a quiet knowing that you've walked these paths before, argued these arguments, loved and lost these same reflections of yourself countless times. But instead of exhaustion, there's a strange calm in that recognition. You no longer react to life's chaos with resistance. You respond with curiosity. Every experience, whether beautiful or painful, feels like an echo of something familiar, something understood at a deeper level. This recognition isn't intellectual, it's spiritual. It's as if the soul is whispering, "You've learned this lesson already. Now live it consciously." Watts would say that this awareness is the beginning of true freedom. When you see the cycle clearly, you no longer need to escape it. The game of karma ends not by winning, but by realizing it was a game all along. In earlier incarnations, the ego clings to identity. It seeks recognition, revenge, validation. But in the final one, identity becomes transparent. You still play the role, but you know it's a role. You laugh when life delivers its usual drama because you can finally see it for what it is, a performance of consciousness, pretending to be separate from itself. That laughter, Watts said, is enlightenment disguised as humor. One of the clearest signs that your soul may be nearing the end of its reincarnational cycle is the growing pull towards silence. Not the silence of isolation, but the silence of understanding. Words begin to feel too small to contain what you feel, too fragile to hold truth. You start valuing stillness more than opinion, presence more than argument. Watts often reminded his listeners that the meaning of life is just to be alive. And in this final cycle, that truth becomes embodied. You no longer need to explain life, you simply live it fully and without grasping. The desire to control others, outcomes, or destiny fades away, replaced by an effortless flow. You start noticing synchronicities, moments when life seems to respond to your inner state like a mirror. The universe stops being something you fight against and becomes something that dances with you. Watts described this as the point when you realize you are not a separate observer of existence. You are existence observing itself. Every coincidence becomes a conversation between you and the cosmos, and every challenge becomes an invitation to deepen awareness. And yet, there is humility in this stage, not superiority, not detachment, but reverence. You no longer see yourself as enlightened or above others. In fact, the more awakened you become, the more tender your heart grows. You see the suffering of others as your own past selves struggling to awaken. Instead of pity, you feel compassion. You understand that awakening is not a privilege. It is a remembrance that arrives when the soul is ready. And so you walk softly, living simply, quietly radiating the peace that others are still searching for. Watts often taught that the final life cycle is not marked by mystical visions or miraculous powers, but by simplicity. The truly awakened person, he said, might appear ordinary, someone who enjoys the rain, who listens more than speaks, who smiles without reason. This ordinariness is the highest form of enlightenment, because it shows that the soul no longer seeks to stand apart from life. The ego dissolves not in grand revelations, but in the quiet acceptance that nothing needs to be different. This, Watts said, is the ultimate realization, the understanding that life was never meant to be solved, only experienced. As this awareness deepens, you begin to sense the interconnectedness of all things. You see how every thought ripples into the collective consciousness, how every act of kindness reverberates through the unseen. Watts described this as the awakening of unity consciousness, the point where empathy becomes natural, where you cannot harm another without feeling it in yourself. You no longer view the world as something happening to you, but as something happening through you. The separation between the self and the world collapses, and what remains is pure participation, the dance between the observer and the observed. In your final cycle, your relationship with time changes. The future no longer feels like something to chase, and the past no longer feels like something to escape. You start living in what Watts called the eternal now. Every moment becomes enough, complete in itself. You don't rush through experiences trying to reach the next. Even simple things, the taste of tea, the sound of the wind, the laughter of a friend, carry the weight of infinity. You realize that eternity was never hidden in another world. It was woven into this one all along. Another sign of this final stage is the dissolution of fear. The fear of death, of loss, of failure. They all begin to lose their grip. Watts would explain that this happens because the soul finally understands the cyclical nature of existence. You've died countless times, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and every death has led to rebirth. Now, even endings are seen as transitions, not tragedies. You no longer cling to permanence because you've realized that impermanence is the miracle. And through this understanding, love transforms. It's no longer the grasping, conditional love of earlier lives, the kind that says, I love you because you make me happy. It becomes the love that simply says, I love because I am. It's love without object, love without need. What's described it as the love of the universe for itself. The realization that the cosmos has always been in love with its own creation. In this final life, you become that love in human form, silent, radiant, and free. Alan Watts often said that enlightenment is not the attainment of something new, but the stripping away of everything false. In the final life cycle, this process happens naturally, not through effort, but through exhaustion of illusion. You stop seeking enlightenment because you finally realize you were never separate from it. Every attempt to grasp truth fades, replaced by a quiet knowing that truth cannot be possessed, only experienced. This stage is not dramatic. It feels like waking up from a long dream. You look around, and everything is the same, yet everything glows with meaning. The world no longer appears as a problem to solve, but as a masterpiece to behold. In this final incarnation, life becomes less about doing and more about being. Watts explained that this is the shift from tension to trust, from the clenched fist of control to the open hand of surrender. You find yourself flowing through each day without forcing outcomes, letting existence unfold as it wishes. The soul no longer believes it needs to manipulate the universe because it finally understands. It is the universe playing with form. What once felt like coincidence now feels like choreography. You start to notice how effortlessly life moves when you stop interfering. A deep harmony emerges between your inner and outer worlds. You no longer see separation between your thoughts and the events around you. They begin to mirror each other in perfect synchrony. This is what's called the music of life. He often reminded his listeners that just as a melody has no goal beyond itself, neither does existence. The final life cycle is the moment you stop rushing to the end of the song and start dancing to every note. Each breath, each heartbeat, each fleeting emotion becomes sacred, not because it will last, but because it won't. Another sign that you may be living your last life is the vanishing of the need to be understood. You no longer defend your beliefs, no longer seek to convince anyone of your truth. Instead, you listen deeply without agenda. Watts would say this is because the awakened soul knows that everyone is on their own perfect journey. The need to fix others dissolves because you recognize that there is never anything broken. You stop seeing yourself as a teacher and start seeing yourself as a mirror, quietly reflecting the same awareness that lives within all beings. And perhaps the most profound transformation is your relationship with the unknown. Where once it created anxiety, now it inspires awe. You begin to realize that mystery is not something to be solved, but something to be loved. Watts described this as the art of wonder. To live in wonder is to stand before the infinite with open eyes and an open heart, to be both the question and the answer, the seeker and the sought. The soul in its final cycle doesn't chase truth anymore. It rests inside it, knowing that to exist at all is already the greatest revelation. By the time the soul nears the end of its incarnational journey, a gentle neutrality arises. Not apathy, but equanimity, a balance that allows you to move through both beauty and tragedy without losing center. Alan Watts said that when a person reaches this state, life becomes a kind of lucid dream. You know that every scene, every emotion, every encounter is a manifestation of consciousness itself. You play your role sincerely, but you never forget that it is a role. Even in the midst of chaos, an inner calm remains, the unshakable awareness that all is unfolding exactly as it should. This awareness brings a lightness to everything you do. You laugh more, not out of mockery, but out of understanding. You cry more too, but your tears are tender, not bitter. You feel the full spectrum of human experience without resistance. Watts often described this as the cosmic humor, the moment you see how the universe hides from itself just to rediscover its own brilliance. The soul in its last life carries this humor gracefully, smiling even through pain, because it knows that the one who suffers and the one who observes are the same. Another hallmark of the final life cycle is solitude that feels like companionship. You no longer fear being alone because you no longer feel separate. Sitting in silence, you sense the pulse of existence moving through you, the same rhythm that beats within stars, trees, and oceans. What would say that solitude becomes communion when the illusion of other dissolves? You realize that the quiet around you is not emptiness, it is presence. You are not apart from the universe. You are its awareness made human for a brief, exquisite moment. Relationships also transform in this final cycle. You no longer cling to people out of need or fear of loss. Love becomes unconditional, not because you're detached, but because you see beyond attachment. What's believed that when love matures, it stops asking for permanence. You begin to love without ownership, to give without expectation, to hold without gripping. You can say goodbye without sadness, knowing that nothing real can ever be lost. This is the soul's great freedom, to love fully and let go completely. And at last, the awakened soul begins to feel time unravel. The days still pass, yet they feel transparent, as though eternity has begun leaking into every moment. You sense that you're no longer moving through time. Time is moving through you. What's called this living in the eternal now? The realization that past and future are only ripples on the surface of a vast, still ocean. The soul in its last life lives from that stillness. It doesn't rush toward tomorrow, nor cling to yesterday. It simply exists, timeless, effortless, awake. Alan Watts often compared the soul's final incarnation to the last movement of a symphony, the moment when every note, every theme introduced in earlier lifetimes returns in perfect harmony. There is no rush, no climax, no desperate search for meaning, only the quiet satisfaction of completion. In this stage, you begin to feel that life itself is bowing, gently, toward closure. Not an ending in sorrow, but a completion in grace. You sense that you've played your part in the grand cosmic composition, and now, like a musician releasing their final chord, you rest in stillness, allowing the sound to fade into silence. One of the most profound aspects of this final stage is the deep reconciliation with paradox. You no longer need everything to make sense. Watts would say that the truly awakened soul embraces contradiction because it sees that opposites are illusions created by the mind. Joy and sorrow, light and shadow, life and death. They are all threads woven into the same eternal fabric. You stop choosing sides. Instead, you honor both, recognizing that one cannot exist without the other. To see unity within duality is to see reality as it truly is, complete, whole, and unspeakably beautiful. This acceptance brings a serenity that words cannot capture. You no longer struggle to define who you are or why you're here. The questions that once kept you awake at night, what is my purpose? Why do I suffer? What happens next? Lose their urgency. Not because you found all the answers, but because you no longer need them. What's called this the liberation from needing to know. It's the peace that arises when the soul understands that mystery is not the absence of truth. It is the truth expressed through silence. As this wisdom deepens, the boundaries between you and existence dissolve even further. The world no longer feels external. It feels intimate, as though life itself is breathing through you. You sense the pulse of the universe in your chest, the rhythm of the stars in your heartbeat. Every encounter becomes sacred. Every leaf, every breeze, every passing stranger a mirror reflecting your own consciousness back at you. What's believed that in this state, you stop relating to life as something happening out there. You realize you are the happening, a momentary expression of the eternal now. And it is here, in this space beyond striving, that the soul experiences its final evolution, gratitude. Not gratitude as a practice, but as a state of being. You feel thankful simply to exist, to have seen, to have felt, to have played your part in the great unfolding. Watts would say that this is the purest form of enlightenment, when gratitude replaces desire and wonder replaces fear. The soul no longer asks to be free. It is freedom itself, smiling through human eyes one last time. In the final movement of the soul's journey, there is nothing left to become, only everything left to be. Alan Watts described this as the return to the source, not as a destination, but as a realization. You understand that you never truly left the source at all. Every lifetime, every lesson, every joy and heartbreak was the universe exploring itself through you. Now, awareness folds gently back into itself, like a wave returning to the ocean. There is no fear in this, only recognition. You see that you were never the wave trying to survive. You were always the sea pretending to be small. In this last life cycle, the distinction between awakening and living disappears. You move through the world as an extension of silence, radiating calm without effort. You don't preach, you don't seek followers. You simply exist as a living reminder that peace is possible here, now, in the middle of all things. What's believed that the awakened soul becomes a reflection of the universe remembering itself. You are no longer a person trying to reach enlightenment. You are enlightenment, smiling through the illusion of a human face. The soul at this stage also understands that death, the very thing most fear, is not the opposite of life, but its continuation in a new form. You begin to sense that the end is not something approaching from the horizon, but something unfolding within you every moment. Each breath is a birth and a death, a constant renewal. What would say that the realization of impermanence is not tragic, it's transcendent. To truly see that nothing lasts is to finally love everything completely, because you know it will never come again. At the deepest level, this awareness becomes play. You laugh at the absurdity of existence, not from arrogance, but from delight. You see that the cosmic game has always been about hide and seek, consciousness hiding itself in form, only to rediscover itself again and again. And in your final turn, you play with open eyes. You no longer hide, nor seek. You simply are. What's called this the cosmic joke, and those who understand it no longer need to escape the world. They dance within it, free, joyful, unbound. And when the soul's time in this form finally comes to an end, it does not resist. It bows gracefully, like an actor stepping off stage after the performance of a lifetime. There is no tragedy, no farewell, only the soft exhale of eternity breathing itself back into itself. What would say that the last life does not end in darkness, but in laughter, the laughter of the universe remembering that it was never lost, never broken, never incomplete. For the soul that is seen through the illusion, death is not goodbye. It is the gentle applause before the next dream begins. At the end of all cycles, when every lesson has been lived and every illusion has dissolved, what remains is the simplest and most profound truth. You were never on a journey to become anything. You were the destination all along. Alan Watts would remind us that life was never about escaping the world, but about awakening within it. The final life cycle isn't a reward for spiritual perfection. It's a return to innocence, the state where everything is sacred again, where you see the divine in the ordinary and the eternal in every fleeting moment. You stop asking, "Why am I here?" because you finally feel it. You are here to be. This realization doesn't arrive with thunder or revelation. It comes quietly, like a soft breath at dawn, the understanding that you are never separate from the universe, only pretending to be. The soul's last incarnation is not an ending, but a merging, the wave remembering it was the ocean all along. What's often said that enlightenment feels less like rising to heaven and more like sinking fully into the present moment. When you see through the veil, you don't disappear, you become utterly alive. You laugh, you cry, you feel everything, and yet, beneath it all, there's peace. To live in this awareness is to finally dance with life instead of chasing it. You no longer strive to fix, prove, or control. You move with the rhythm of existence itself, light as breath, anchored in stillness. What would call this the wisdom of letting go? It's not surrender as defeat. It's surrender as liberation, the recognition that nothing needs to be held because nothing can ever truly be lost. The awakened soul does not resist the current. It becomes the current, flowing effortlessly through everything it once feared. And maybe that's the ultimate secret of the last life. It's not about escaping the cycle, but loving it so completely that it releases you. You stop seeking eternity somewhere beyond, and begin to feel it pulsing within you. In every heartbeat, every sunrise, every shared glance that reminds you that you are part of something infinite. Death no longer feels like an end, but like a continuation of that same sacred rhythm. The self dissolves, but the song continues, and in that music, you realize that you are never just listening. You are the melody itself. If this reflection resonated with you, if it stirred something quiet yet familiar within, consider staying connected. Subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts below, and let this space become a gathering of awakened souls remembering together. Every comment, every insight, every shared moment adds another note to this cosmic symphony. Because, as Alan Watts once said, you are not a stranger in this universe. You are the universe, becoming aware of itself.